Today we are working on completing the square. We are going to solve quadratic equations by completing the square in section 10.5. We need to review a couple things. The first is the perfect trinomial squares that you learned in chapter 9. A squared plus 2ab plus b squared factors into a plus b quantity squared. And a squared minus 2ab plus b squared factors into a minus b quantity squared. These are two items that you need to remember from chapter 9 to help you with completing the square. Let's start out with the general way of completing the square. We have x squared plus bx plus, we're going to put a little squiggle in here, equals c plus a little squiggle. Whatever you add to the left, you have to add to the right. An important thing is that we must have a 1 in front of our x squared term. We can't do a completing the square if it's not a 1. Then we are going to put in for the squiggle that we've added here, whatever b is divided by 2 squared. And what we do to one side, we have to do to the other. What this will help us do on the left-hand side is it will help us make that a perfect square trinomial so that we can then factor that trinomial into a binomial squared, and the right-hand side will be whatever those constants turn out to be when you simplify them. I know right now this looks a little bit intimidating. Let's get into it with numbers and show you how to solve it in terms of completing the square. But here you have it with all the variables in it. Let's solve this first one in completing the square. We have x squared plus 6x equals 7. And let's put our squiggles in there. Plus a squiggle, plus a squiggle. We're going to come up with our squiggles by taking 6 divided by 2 equals 3. So whatever that number is squared, that's going to be 3 squared on both sides. This creates a perfect trinomial square on the left-hand side. So now I have x plus 3 quantity squared when I factor that. And on the right-hand side, I really have 7 plus 9, which is equal to 16. Let's go ahead and take the square root of both sides of the equation like we did in section 10.4. That means that we have x plus 3 equals a plus minus 4. And just like we did in section 10.4, we brought the 3 over, it became negative, so we have negative 3 plus or minus 4. That tells us x is equal either to a positive 1 or a negative 7. So negative 3 plus 4 is positive 1, negative 3 minus 4 is a negative 7. And these are the two solutions to our quadratic equation by completing the square. The next completing the square that we have up here is x squared minus 2x equals 3, and we'll put our plus a squiggle in there. And we want to come up with what we are adding to both sides. Again, that is that b term divided by 2. So we are going to be adding a negative 1 squared to both sides. Writing that as a negative 1 in parentheses will help remind me when I'm actually writing the factors that this has to be a negative 1 in here. It's going to be the same thing as that negative 1 in parentheses. And on the right-hand side this time we have 4. Again, we are going to take the square root of both sides. When we do so, we'll have x minus 1 is equal to a plus minus 2. Bring the negative 1 over so it becomes positive. We will have 1 plus 2, which is equal to 3, and 1 minus 2, which is a negative 1. These are the two solutions to your quadratic equation by completing the square. Our last problem that we have here, we have a 3 as our leading coefficient. We can't have a leading coefficient that isn't a 1. In order to help ourselves out, we must divide every term by whatever that leading coefficient is. The first one leaves us with x squared, then we have plus 4x minus 6 equals 0. You need to now rewrite the equation so that you have that negative 6 On the other side, it becomes positive, and we're going to put our squiggles in here. Okay, again, we're dividing the b term by 2 and squaring it. So here we will have 2 squared, and I'm just going to write plus 4 on the other side. You can do that, that's fine. We will have our x plus 2, quantity squared when we factor, equals 10. And when we take the square root of both sides, we know that 10 is not a perfect square number. That's okay, we can still work with it. We will have x plus 2 equals a plus minus square root of 10. This is where we pick up our calculator and we find out what the square root of 10 is. We'll write down x plus 2 is equal to a plus minus 3.16. And again, bring your 2 over, it will become negative, so we have plus minus 3.16. X will be equal to a negative 2 plus a positive 3.16, which is actually 1.16. And x is also equal to a negative 2 minus 3.16, which will give us a negative 5.16. Yes, these are approximations for the solutions to the quadratic equation, and that's one thing that completing the square helps us do very nicely. Good luck.